Welcome to episode 23 of the Kevin Rooke Show. Today's conversation is with Adam Curry, one of the pioneers of the podcasting 2.0 movement and the value for value business model. Our conversation started off with Adam's history in media, his transition from broadcasting to podcasting, how he's seen the podcast industry evolve, and how Apple and Spotify and other players have grown their influence over time, and then what he's doing at the Podcast Index to try and open up podcasting again and make it accessible for all, including the work he's doing on the Lightning Network with the value for value business model to make sure that any podcaster can earn directly from their audience using one of the modern Podcast 2.0 apps available today. Now, since this is a Lightning podcast, I want to make sure I get this pitch right. If you're listening to this show, right now, I want you to stop what you're doing. Make sure you're on a Podcast 2.0 app. That could be Fountain. That's my favorite to use, but there are a number of them available. And I want you to, at the end of the show, send in sats that reflect the value that you got out of this episode. So if you got a lot of value from this show, send in a lot of sats. If you didn't get much, send in a few sats. That's my feedback mechanism. That's what I'm using to determine how much you guys like this show. So you can send in sats, you can send in comments and questions. I read off all the comments, questions at the end of the episode in the lightning round. But that's going to be, from now on, my primary mechanism I'm going to use to determine whether or not the audience is enjoying this show. So you guys are the ones that are going to be able to tell me through the number of sats you send in how valuable this content is. I don't really care about the number of listens of the show. I don't really care about any of the vanity metrics from Web 2. To me, I want to know that you guys are getting value, and the best way you can show that is by sending in sats to the show when you do get value out of the show. Real quick before we get into the episode, today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. We'll have more from Voltage later in the episode in the lightning round. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really excited to talk to you about Lightning podcasting, but I realized that to discuss Lightning podcasting in depth, it might make more sense to rewind and go before Lightning, before podcasting, and start off with broadcasting. Can you talk to me a little bit about that first moment you got excited about broadcasting?
Well, first of all, hey, Kevin, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. The first moment I got excited about broadcasting, yes, it was for Christmas, my parents bought me, and I must have been 12, 13, the Radio Shack 101 projects in one. And it was, I actually still have it. It's like a breadboard. It has, it's like kind of like a serving tray about this big, and it has all kinds of components on it. You can look it up on, you can search for it. There's clubs around this thing. And so it had, transistors, resistors, capacitors, relays, microphones, all kinds of stuff. And then you had this bunch of wires that were all color coded. They were different lengths, like white was the longest and blue and red. And then you had a book, a schematic book, and you'd open it up, and in there it would say, okay, connect this end of the transistor 1 to this node of the transistor, and do that with the blue wire. And so you kind of learned how schematics worked as you were putting together without solder. And there was a lot of these really cool projects, and near the end there was a little project for an FM radio transmitter. I'm like, oh, okay. So, I put all the wires together. It was by far the most wires for some reason. And it worked, and I could receive it on FM radio right down the hall. And then I quickly learned about antenna technology because, obviously I want to see, that's when you go, how far can the signal reach? That's what you want to do when you build a transmitter. So from there, I actually got an antenna strung up, a dipole up on the roof. My parents let me do a lot of crazy shit, which is nice. And I hooked up a record player, yes, vinyl record player, to the input, and again, just kind of like jacked it all in. Didn't even have a preamp or anything, so just but it was kind of working. My mom drove me around the block to see how far it would go, And this was in the Netherlands where I grew up, and they had like no commercial radio. It was only government controlled airwaves. So the kids in the neighborhood, they figured this out pretty soon what I was doing, and they came over like, dude, that's really cool. You're broadcasting. I love your station. And it was just for putting the record on, you know. And so then I built a little mixer, got another record player, added a microphone. So that was really the sequence of events that got me excited about broadcasting, which really led me into a life of radios, transmitters. I'm a ham radio operator. You know, I took all the tests. I got my license. I got tons of gear and radios and stuff. So my kind of default programming has always been, I've also built pirate radio stations in the Netherlands with big antennas and big power, and of course podcasting. So it's kind of like I've always been involved in the technical side of a broadcast technology. And that would even include the move to digital in audio, digital in video. And I've always somehow taken advantage of that to broadcast and build, audiences and really have fun. So it started when I was 13.
Yeah. So when you were 13, you mentioned it started out of fun, but did you have a sense for how important broadcasting would become and how the technology would evolve and how it would change the way we communicate? Or was this just like a fun project at the beginning?
No, I wouldn't say about broadcasting about, knowing if it's important or not. It was just a thing growing up. But I do recall my grandmother gave me, when I was 7, gave me a Sony AM transistor radio, and it was a little square block like this, and the 9-volt battery went in, had a handsome leatherette case, and a little twist dial, and I would listen to basketball games with it under my pillow, which invariably my parents would, have to come into my room. I was fast asleep. The volume was full cranked, so they have to turn it off, and I didn't even know anymore. But I'd listen, and I'm not a sports guy at all, which is odd because this is such an early influence. But I'd listen to these games, and I was fascinated by the picture that it built in my head, much like reading a book. The theater of the mind, hearing the squeak of the sneakers on the floor, hearing the announcers describe the shots, describe the plays, the mix of the audience level, what the ducking of the microphones, all of this stuff I was very aware of and loved that part of it. I love sound. I love creating sound and building a place where someone who's listening creates a vision of what the sound, where the sound is originating from, and what's in the room or what's going on.
How did you make that transition then from traditional broadcasting, let's say on radio, to then getting into podcasting? And did you have a similar level of excitement when you first kind of discovered this medium and what it could do?
In 1991, I think, I met a guy online, Carl Jacob, who was working at Sun Microsystems. And I was doing MTV, I was doing syndicated radio shows, and I was just trying to figure out this internet thing. And I was very interested in how can I broadcast? Can I actually put a signal through this wire? Because this is really, the World Wide Web only just kind of came. Dude, were you even born in 1991? Not to be a dick about it, but okay, so what I'm saying. So this was old times, right? And I had a 56K frame relay, which meant it was kind of as fast as a modem, but I didn't have to dial in. It was a dedicated line, so I could run a server or keep a computer up on the network all the time. And it was actually pre-web. And but I had registered MTV.com, and that's how I got Carl's attention. And he said, "Oh, dude, I got to show you this thing. Like, watch this." And actually, he was really kind. He sent me a Sun Voyager workstation, and it was this beautiful machine. Again, I still have it somewhere, although the hard drive crashed. And it had a color LCD screen that tilted. It was a portable. It had a huge suitcase you carry with you, and it ran Unix. It ran Sun OS, Solaris. And so I had to learn that. And I I knew a little bit of Unix, but I got to get this thing working. I was like, okay. And it was like confusing, but I loved the tinkering so much. And then he said, okay, now watch this. And then he started up a song in San Francisco on his workstation, and then automatically, boom, a player opened up on my workstation. I started to hear the song. I'm like, dude, you're fucking broadcasting through the internet. That's badass, from San Francisco to New Jersey. Holy shit. I'm like, this is my mission. And there was a protocol back in the day called the M-Bone, the multicast backbone. And it was cool because you could then use this multicast ring or network of computers, and you wouldn't have to send out 1,000 streams, one to everybody. We didn't have that kind of bandwidth back in the day. You could travel on this multicast network, and everyone could kind of pick up the packets, and it was like a broadcast. And I actually did a rave in the Netherlands, and we put it on the M-Bone live. Now, who could see that was really college kids who were had access to terminals and stuff, and it was really the real IT nerds who were participating in it, because it was totally complicated. No one could see it really except the people doing it, but it was so much fun. So I was already very comfortable with the idea that somehow I'd be able to broadcast on this thing. And I just continued to do radio. I mean, my radio stuff continued well into the beginning of podcasting. And what happened was really a confluence of a couple of things. I'd been, since 2000, I'd been working with Dave Weiner on the concept of putting an attachment on an RSS feed so that you could then subscribe to something that would download content, and you'd have it automatically. And it would be a good experience instead of clicking and waiting for something to download. It was like a subscription, which is exactly what an RSS or a podcast is. And then the second thing that happened is I saw my first iPod, and I'm like, oh, that's the same thing that my grandmother gave me. That's a little transistor radio, and we should be able to receive radio on this through the internet. And then the light bulb went off, like, so what if I have this RSS feed, subscribe to a feed with files, with sound files, my show, or just whatever we were calling it, and it sees it downloads it at night, it updates iTunes. You still had to synchronize the two, and there was no iPhone or anything at the time. And then it would trigger an update, and then there, lo and behold, on my iPod would be a new playlist with the name of my show with an episode underneath it, and you could pick your iPod up and leave and play it. Wow. And then I knew, okay, I know what to do. I need to create a show every single day and get software developers to build these radios, because that's really what it was. The iPod was the radio, but you needed the software to make it work. And that's what we now call a podcast app. And there were no apps. There was no concept of apps at the time. And so I started the daily source code. And with that, I was broadcasting basically every single day. Only it wasn't going out on the stream. I was putting it on a server, and all these radios out there were receiving it, and podcasting was born.
Wow.
It was very natural for me, although with all the benefits, like you can start whenever you want. People can, no longer they have to tune in at a certain time, but they can just go ahead and listen at their convenience once it's updated. This to me, and we have feedback loops through email, and we didn't have a lot of the stuff we had. We had no social media, but there was this obvious feedback loop, and I know how to use that when broadcasting. And the proof was with the development of podcasting 1.0 was literally, I'd be talking to the developers, and then I'd talk about what I learned on the show and all the mistakes we had made, or the cool stuff that had happened, or the breakthroughs that one developer had. And this loop just became a show where we were developing the show and the technology to do it at the same time. It was a beautiful experience.
And having started from such an early stage in the internet's infancy, there must have been a much smaller addressable market on day one when you were just discovering this stuff. Where you were thinking,
well, the TAM, as you're referring to.
Yeah, the radio must have been a far larger market. But what was it about the podcasting that got you excited? Was it fast growth? Was it the open nature of it? Like, did you have an idea that would overtake radio at that time?
Well, let's understand first about radio. Radio is inherently a local medium. Today it's we don't think twice about a syndicated show where the host is in New York, but you hear him in Dallas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, etc. Sirius XM is literal satellite broadcasting, so you hear it everywhere. But radio, in its essence, really worked best at a local level. So the stations that I worked at, excluding the one in the Netherlands when I was on the big public broadcaster, which reached the whole country, I built many pirate stations that only worked in a city like Amsterdam. So that was the audience, but it was a radio station for Amsterdam. Local radio is still supposed to kind of be about the local area, the local ads, local news. It's no longer profitable to do that. It's just too expensive, and there's just not enough revenue, and the interruptive advertising model is falling quickly out of favor. Thanks to streaming apps, no one wants to sit through commercials anymore. Why should I have to? Where's the Hulu of radio? There's your answer. That's podcasting.
Interesting. So when podcasting started, I guess it took from the advertising model of radio. What was that transition like from going from an advertising model to then trying to enable value for value? Because this is something that you've talked about at length.
I thought seriously after I'd met Steve Jobs and he had announced podcasting in iTunes, and I talked to him about the business model of selling ads, and he agreed. He said, "Yeah, that sounds kind of like the right way to do it." And now if Steve Jobs agrees with you, you're going to go off and do that immediately. But I really thought that we could change advertising, that we could have advertisers understand that really being a part of the relationship that the podcaster has with the audience is where you want to be, and not just breaking into that relationship and yelling your message and drilling in a phone number or a URL or something for a product. And I failed big time because advertising does not change. This particular type of ads, it's still what advertising believes, but it's quickly changing. And of course, Facebook took a whole lot of the local advertising, which hurt radio, hurt newspapers. I mean, we go back to Craigslist. Newspapers started to die when they lost all the classifieds to Craigslist and Backpage and all that shit. So, there were several. I even started a company, raised money. It was called Pod Show, and we just could not do it. We could not. Podcasts are inherently not brand safe. If the advertiser can't trust what's in the podcast and it's not a consistent product like NCIS, or some other show like that, then they don't want to really advertise on it because, and this is where cancel culture slowly crept in because, oh, that guy said something shitty, advertiser A, you shouldn't be advertising. And what is an advertising going to do? Yeah, you're right. Screw it. I don't want to be associated. You're not even going to investigate. You don't even want to question that. You don't want your brand tarnished. So that became a real problem. And when John C. Dvorak and I started doing No Agenda, now we're coming up on 15 years in October, we knew that we didn't want to have any advertising. We didn't even think we wanted any money at all. We just wanted to talk and do a short show, 20 minutes. And now, we're at 3.5 hours easily twice a week. But in the interim, we said, the stuff we're doing is actually a lot of work. So you guys got to pay us. And if you don't pay us enough or for us to make it work for us, then we can't do it. And we started off the first few episodes with like, donate $5 a month or whatever. We set a limit on it. And we quickly saw that that's not going to help us pay for anything. That was not really working. And then we said, you know what? Why don't you just pay us whatever you think it's worth? And I had a simple pitch. And we didn't call it value for value at that point. But it was John and I spent a lot of time looking at different donation models at churches, at nonprofits. We didn't want to be a 501c3 nonprofit because then we'd have still some government control. It's like, you can't talk about this or whatever. And the whole point of deconstructing news, which is what we do, is to be able to question the mainstream narrative and by extension question, the source of the narrative, which is often the government. So like, no, we don't want that. But we don't want to have to promise people a life in heaven or hell if you don't donate like a church. So we said, this is really such an interesting product. What is a media property worth? For as long as media property has been around, it's always been this artificial, there's not really a market, for what you at home think it's worth. You're sold your information is sold, your demographic, statistics, other things you watch, what you buy in your credit card. I mean, and it's just shoved in your face with an ad, which of course was always static and broad and not personalized at all, which was the next promise that I think kind of failed. Get the right ad for the right product at the right time. Yeah, okay. All I see is when I buy something, I get an ad for the same thing. That algo is still, and by the way, that works for some reason. So it's so stupid that they keep it in because something works about it. But that's beyond the point. We said, why don't you just, whatever it's worth to you? I mean, you may think we're full of shit and it's no good and this was in the no value to you. Give us nothing. If you think it was worth $5, give us $5. You think, how about this? You listen to us for an hour and a half. You could have gone to the movies. You could have taken a date. You have a drink and some popcorn, $50. Was this worth the same in your hour and a half? Was it as enjoyable? You might not have gotten laid with us, but maybe you had some other, maybe it was better than the movie. I don't know. And within a week, we got a lot of people sending us $5. We got a very surprising amount sending us $50. And there were several $500 donations. Wow. And we never looked back from there. We're like, oh, okay. And when you think about it logically, if you have $10 million in the bank and you really enjoyed something because it was informative or you laughed, $500 is different for you. That's your value. I can't determine how much a song or a book or whatever is really worth to you. We're artificially pushed into that that pricing structure. And of course, that's gotten really weird throughout the years with, Apple and Google taking 30% off the top of anything you put in their app stores. And and predetermining that, Steve Jobs kind of ruined the music business by doing two things. One, unbundling the album so you could buy individual tracks, which ruined this beautiful product that was an album. Of course, we already lost liner notes and beautiful artwork kind of in the CD era. But then it was also 99 cents. That was the price of any song, 99 cents, 99 cents. Well, but if I listen to my favorite love song, I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, it's simple. It's a great love song. I pay $99 for it every single time, but they forced me through 99 cents. Now the default, and so we started to call this value for value, meaning we gave you something of value, which may be worth nothing to you. Please send nothing back. If it was valuable to you, just put a number down, whatever it is, send it back to us and put a note in it. And so we started seeing people show up with really interesting numerology. They send us, 420, $4.20, $69.69, all these weird things.
How were people sending money on day one?
I'm sorry?
Using? How were people sending you money on day one?
PayPal. PayPal, we've accepted PayPal, checks, Zelle, bank transfer, money orders, cash, gold coins. We've always said, if we can accept it, we'll accept it. Bring it on. And so we said, this is not and this is, I think, key for podcasting. We said, value for value doesn't just have to be money. It can be one of three things: your time, your talent, or your treasure. Now, we need the treasure, and a lot of people will find that the easiest to support us and to express the value they receive. But we also need a web server, and we need a website, and we need a chat room, and if you want to do that, we'll give you the same credits. We will thank you publicly. You will be a hero to us, and all of you will be, from this day forward, producers. You're not listeners, you're producers. And even if you support us with your treasure, there will be a topic one day that is the thing you know everything about. You know everything about this topic because it's what you do. And we're going to say something dumb, or you're going to have some additional information, and it's your job to get that to us. And so I built in the background an information system with Dave Jones called the Freedom Controller, oddly enough, which is this beautiful content management system based upon outlines where I can store all of this stuff and categorize it. And so, of course, from that, people started to build search engines. And we really said, this is your show. So you can do anything you want. You can register domain names. And we don't care. Just help us out. And that's also value for value. And this created kind of a slow rolling, but a very sturdy snowball. and people would see, what time and effort other people put into building things or promoting the show or helping us. We talked about that on the show, and they would then say, I need to send some more money. Because what is the default? There's two problems with value for value in our thinking. The first one is, if you give it away for free and say, send me something, whatever you think it's worth, no one will do that. That's just the default programming. And I'm here to say, after 15 years and 2 families, we live comfortably. We're not rich. We live comfortably. We put kids through college. It's not true. You will receive more than you ever expected if you have an outstanding product. I mean, don't expect anything if you don't have a great product. The second problem is the ask. It is very difficult for many people to say, could you please support the show, send money? They feel it's a form of begging. This is for street musicians, for busking. This is tips. No. You have to explain, and you have to have a pitch, and the value for value. My example of the movie theater, but you can come up with any example you want. But ultimately, you just have to ask, was this of any value to you? And if so, please put that into a number and send it back to me. And people do it. So this is just plain and simple experience. People do it. And once you try it, everyone has the same reaction. Holy crap, I never expected this. I never expected people to be so generous, to be so supportive. Those are the two things that you have to kind of train yourself in for value. But once you start living like that, I mean, it's a lifestyle, and it's really cool because you get what you are worth. And that may be less some days, like, wow, damn, was it me? Did anyone else have a bad day? And you've got to communicate with people, and you got to talk to them, make sure you're doing, it really keeps you honest. It keeps you on your toes. And every single show, it's like, how'd we do? Okay. I don't care how many people listen. I don't care at all. I want people who give me value back. I want the emails. I want the great ideas. And of course, we also want the financing. So as long as we can satisfy literally our rent and our bills, we're happy.
Yeah.
And you live a really fucking happy life that way. It's insanely cool. And I'm not at the whim of anybody. And the longer you do it, the bigger your base comes over time, the less wild the swings are. But also, that that's going to still be sustainable while you get your shit together if you haven't quite figured it out, or if you got off track or whatever. It's a whole different way of working and a way of living.
Right. You've clearly found a really successful business in this model. Have you seen it applied to other industries or other verticals, perhaps like music and books? Have you seen examples of people doing this already? Or do you think that may be something to come once people realize that this can be a sustainable model?
There's several musicians who have done this very successfully and have documented their journeys doing value for value. Palmer, what's her name? I forget her name. There's all kinds of versions of crowdfunding for projects. It's all a variation of the same thing. I personally like, because it's a regular, doing an album is something I think different than so you can crowdfund an album with your existing base. But with podcasting 2.0, we're already seeing audiobooks, we're seeing albums, podcasts. Obviously, we're seeing documentaries show up, and there's some extra benefits of podcasting 2.0's value for value system that makes that even more fun. So we have seen several podcasts go value for value. Many have consulted with us, and we've helped them because there's some actually, Dvorak and I are now seriously talking about writing a book and giving it away value for value. So, anybody can read the book, and then if you get any value from it, then send us some value for the book. That's how strongly we believe in it, because there's some things to it that you do need to do, like reminding people that your show is coming up. A newsletter. It's very simple things, but once you kind of get into the hang of it, right down to how the IRS likes to see this, the structure of this company. We'll explain that as well, because it's very weird when you have hundreds of payments coming in through cash and checks and bank transfers. Like, that triggers all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what are these guys doing? What kind of outfit are you running? So, we already kind of went through that, and so we understood, just some simple things to do there. But ultimately, it's a system, and it's like anything else. You got to work it. You got to train yourself in it. We all know how to say, like and subscribe, smash the like button. Okay. So that has a small benefit at this point, for YouTubers. The worst thing you can possibly do, and this is just, words really matter. Don't call this tipping. If you're saying, hey, tip me something, you're going to get 20% less, 15% of what you could have gotten. Because you're saying, I want a tip. It's like, what are you, an idiot? Don't be, psychologically, you don't work for tips. I would like you to pay me or send me the value that is equal to what you received, whatever you determine that to be. And I will be just as happy with your 50 cents as I will your $5 million.
Right.
I really will, because it's, there's a lot of people. There are homeless people who send money to us.
And it's a direct feedback loop for you to then see the quality of the content you're creating, right? Because you may not get that through an advertiser. You'll get feedback from an advertiser if you get more views or more listens, but you won't get that feedback if it's higher quality necessarily. How important to you is it that you're being funded by a network of your audience versus an advertiser? Like, how heavily does that weigh into the equation? Like, would you take, if you had to do this trade-off of like X dollars from an advertiser or like half X dollars from the audience, would you take that?
Brother Kevin, I am 57 years old, and I have no time for meetings with fucking advertisers or the salesperson or no. And my wife and I have even discussed, what if Spotify offers you the Joe Rogan deal? So at this point in my life, no, seriously. First of all, I've had a lot of money. I spent it all. But I've never gone hungry. I know that with a lot of money comes a lot of bull crap that I really don't want. But the freedom to do what I do, however I want to do it, and the only people who can call me on it is the people who support the show and my partner, who I produce the show with, and that freedom is worth $1 billion. It is just, there's no self-censorship. Of course, you censor yourself for all, not to be a dick. You got to do some, but it's not because you have to be worried about saying something, especially in today's day and age, that will get someone riled up enough to go talk to the advertisers or the advertising agency, and then you lose your income, and there's a whole bunch of hassle, and it's not worth it. And it's not a modern way of financing media. It's, we have in fact, the postmodern method.
Now, why do you think now is the right time for podcasting 2.0, value for value? Why is this the moment where people are going to switch from advertising to this business model? Is it because of the ability to now seamlessly earn money online through Lightning Network or through Bitcoin? Or is it maybe increasing pressure from censorship and concerns about what kind of information you can share? People maybe opting for an audience first approach. Why do you think now is the kind of right time for this model?
So Dave Jones and I started this project about a year and a half, 2 years ago, almost a year and a half. And the genesis of it was multiple steps, but it's when I met with Steve Jobs in 2005, I guess it was, and he's like, okay, put this in. I want to put this in iTunes, do podcasts. Great. I'm going to give you our directory. Here's the 3,000 podcasts I think we had at the time, iPodder.org. It was an open directory. It was a cool project by itself. Because I was just thinking broadcasting. I wasn't thinking about radios. I knew that, holy crap, Apple's going to make it much easier. This will be good. That was a mistake in hindsight, because what happened is, with podcasting being by default highly distributed, I mean, there's 50, 60 podcast hosting companies around the world, probably more. So it doesn't come from one place. I literally made Apple the default on-ramp because of their size. So you had to go through the registration process with them to get into the Apple Podcast app, which for a permissionless, decentralized concept is messed up. But it was worth it because Apple, and by the way, Apple was a very good steward. They played very nice in general. And that went on for a long time. And it's one thing when you're building a radio or a podcast app and there's a couple 10,000 feeds out there. It's another when there's 4 or 5 million. So in order to actually make an app perform well, I mean, you're now in it. This is always the case with distributed versus centralized. It became a little bit heavy for an app to track all of the podcasts. And so what all the app developers started doing is accessing this open API that Apple had on their podcast database, their index, because that's how their app worked. So by default, it kind of had to be an open system, and they let everybody use their API to build podcast apps. And there's many successful podcast apps besides that from Apple, and one is Overcast. And I was listening to Above Tech podcast, the developer, the owner of Overcast app, Marco. He was talking about how Apple had been messing around with their API, and it was with their Apple News podcast. And so now if you queried the Apple News podcast, it would give you back the data, but it wouldn't actually tell you where the RSS feed was. So you couldn't parse that yourself. Now they were messing with an openly distributed system. Okay, it's their own, but they proved that they were not trustworthy. They're willing to mess with what comes out of the API. Simultaneously, there was this takedown that Apple really spearheaded of several podcasts. Alex Jones, X22 report, some QAnon stuff. It's like, and whatever. But it was a coordinated takedown. Facebook and Google, everyone participated overnight. All of these podcasts were gone. Now, because all the independent apps were using the Apple database, all these podcasts also disappeared from all these apps. Like, oh no, that's not okay. Same time, I just kind of met Joe Rogan, and I've been on a show like 4 times now. The first time, and this is where he told me I got this deal with Spotify, and I'm like, oh, that's really great, Joe, but I got to do something because I have to, because Joe Rogan also left all these apps. This was the #1 podcast, arguably. Okay, so how do we keep the open podcasting attractive for the next 10 Joe Rogans? Because they'll be there long after I'm gone. There'll be great Joe Rogans and Joe Roganites and Roganettes and whatever. We'll have all kinds of super successful people. So we need to be able to incentivize everybody in the chain. And this is what's never really happened before. So Apple had no incentive to run an honest open database because they make no money off of it, and they provided no support, and they kind of do what they want to do. And they, in fact, pivoted and said, there's no money in podcasts. I'm going to do subscriptions. We'll just leave this other thing kind of running. Value for value or donation type systems had also proven to be a problem, such as Patreon, which it's based upon what we do with levels that, they still have levels and things, and it's not as open-ended. It's a little, but it was more of a platform. And they had also proven that they were willing to deplatform people from the payment world, even for something you might have done on a different platform. Someone had said something over on YouTube. Well, we don't like that you said that there, so we don't want you on your platform. No more money for you. And this started to go down the line to the payment processors, to MasterCard, and the people who actually do the money changing, who already are making it hard for even legal dealers in states where it's legal of marijuana products and other types of things. So now you have a problem with being deplatformed from the apps and from the money. And so Dave and I had been doing enough RSS work with this Freedom Controller project we've been working on that I called him up and said, and we do this all the time. I said, I think I got a project. This one will work. This is going to be great. And by the way, we got to fix this because this is messed up. We've got to build a new index, a new database of podcasts. Everything's in there. We don't take anything out. We keep it, tidy, and we'll offer a free API to developers so they can switch over, use our open database, and we'll kind of see where it goes. We're going to extend podcasting, so we want to put in new features. Since the problem has always been, for a decade, there was no new features in podcasting because the hosting companies would have to implement a new feature in the feed that their customers use, and then mainly Apple would have to understand that change and implement it. And Apple never communicated with anybody. They didn't care. Like, we don't care about podcasting. We love it. People buy our devices for it. We don't really feel like getting into development. They didn't say that, but they said it by never doing anything. So we said, look, we're the new guys. We now have more feeds than Apple with a free API. Everybody can connect to it. Hey, hosting companies, we got some ideas for some new features. And the first one is, we got an idea for value in streaming money, and we'll use the Lightning Network, which is this kind of Venmo for Bitcoin, which allows for very cheap, very fast transactions, true micro payments, which is one of the big promises of the internet. Promise number one, your refrigerator will know when the milk has run out and will automatically order it for you. Of course, that's bullshit. That hasn't happened yet. But micropayments hasn't really happened either because of the transaction fees. It was just never feasible. And so now there's this blockchain type token thing that behaves like money, that was perfectly appropriate for us to implement this. And I said, well, why don't we put these two things into one, the new index, a money flow that goes directly from the listener's podcast wallet, as we call it, from their app straight to the podcaster, and will incentivize everybody, including the app developers, by enabling a split. So if someone is going to give $1 to a podcaster, the podcaster can say, okay, thank you for your $1, but I want 5 cents to go to the app that I'm using, that you're using at this moment, to listen to it, to incentivize the app developer to do more work. I want 1% to go to the podcast index because they're providing the free API. And I want 30% to go to my co-host or my producer, and I'll take the rest. And that's actually, so that the app gets that information from the index, that payment information, and then the app that the listener is using sends all those individual payments directly from them to those recipients. No middleman, no one's in the middle, real time, uninterruptible. And we rolled this out, and because of how you extend a technology like RSS, it's called something called a namespace, which basically says this RSS feed utilizes extra features. It's this feature set, it's like we uncorked this huge just geyser of creativity of all these features people had wanted to implement for a decade, and we just started doing them. Like, fuck it, yeah, we'll put in chapters, and we'll put in transcripts and people links and geotags and trailer bits, and now we're getting very close to comments on an episode that work in any podcast app. So you can comment on one app and it'll show up in another one. I mean, this is the holy grail, right? So all this stuff just started rolling, and just like podcasting 1.0, I started podcasting 2.0, the podcast with Dave, and we just started, and we'd have now we have tools, right? Now I can bring in the developer who's in Germany, and we can talk on the show, and it sounds good, and it's not, shit's not breaking. We couldn't do any of this 20 years ago. Right. So this is now, it's an animal, and we're just creating all this amazing stuff. And of course, we had a high uptake of Bitcoin podcasts, who saw, like Marty Bent, and also I have to say, Paul and the guys over Paulito and the guys over at Sphinx, they really showed us how to do this. They had all of the bits, and then it was like we had chocolate. We bumped into their peanut butter at the right moment. Like, whoa, and we were all super excited. And then we just got this thing kind of working, and that was a model for other developers. And then Tim Kay came along with lnpay.com, and so we're able to do kind of this interim custodial, but at least we can bootstrap the idea as self-custodial wallets, I think is the term that's going to be used as those start to come online with projects like Greenlight and stuff. So we're just bootstrapping this thing. And I think the critical difference of this open project is that it's also funded value for value. So if you don't send us a donation, we're going to have to stop. By the way, you can, every week there's a fresh new copy of the entire database. All of our code is in GitHub. You could compete with us tomorrow. If you got $1 billion, go build a new index. Good luck. And then of course, but what binds it all together is the splits. So when one person's successful, everyone else in the chain wins because they get a piece of it, and that's built into the spec. It's built into also the philosophy of the value for value podcasting, that the app developer gets a piece. The hosting companies are coming online. They will probably make deals with their customers to get a piece of a split. Maybe you don't have a monthly fee. I mean, we have a real economy, a real use case here that is, I think, one of the best ones of the Lightning Network and perhaps of Bitcoin itself.
I agree. Yeah, there's some really cool use cases for Lightning podcasting. Like I've been using it myself. In this show, started it as a podcasting 2.0 podcast, have been earning sats. It's crazy to see the growth of it. And
are you using Helipad?
I'm using Fountain.
Right. No, but are you on the receiving side? You have the Helipad boostergram monitor. You see that in Fountain, right?
Yes. Yep,
oh,
exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Oscar, those guys are fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
I love what they're doing. That's so cool. And
so
you can even edit your splits right in the app, right?
Exactly.
Dude, yeah. That is so cool. And that just happens, It's like, and so now we've given them a special partner API so that they can change the value blocks in the database. And this is all so beautiful, man. Because I want Oscar to do $1 million, because we'll get $10,000 of that. That's 1%, so we'll be super happy.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say then that when you're thinking about the overall podcasting landscape, is it a fair assessment to say that, like, on the one side you have Apple and Spotify trying to close off podcasting, kind of like trying to take more of that industry for themselves, and then on the other hand you have Podcast Index trying to open it up? Is that roughly a fair assessment today?
Well, you can look at it a couple ways. I consider this to be legacy apps because they really don't have the features that we have, and people are just adopting and moving forward. So it would be amazing if they implemented any of the new namespace features. You don't have to enable the value for value part. I understand that, but they're not doing that. So they're not really a part of the club. And Apple, and I've spoke a lot with James Boggs, who really ran the division before he left. And, I've talked a lot about podcasting 2.0 and the features. And then Spotify started to, do these exclusive deals, and Apple got into this. Well, should we, because, they've always kind of had half a testicle in the content waters, with Apple TV Plus and all this stuff. And they've never really serious enough, or I'm not quite sure. And so they, and in fact, when they were talking about this new subscription service, I said, what do you think? I said, it's stupid. I said, why don't you just be with the cool kids, man? Let's do some cool shit now. But I think they also took it, and I appreciate that, because they have been good stewards of it in general, as, okay, we're going to focus on subscriptions, and we don't really care about the rest. You're either in our database and it works or not. And if we change stuff, that's our prerogative. If that messes up your external app, that's your problem, because we've never officially supported it. So Apple, to me, is just kind of given up. I don't think they're that important. They are a default player. So, it's a way for people to get into it. But, with podcasting, we have a marketing that's much stronger than Apple's and Spotify combined, because the actual people talking to the users of these apps will say, try a new podcast app, newpodcastapps.com. That's the marketing. I don't need to have $1 billion budget for that. Spotify is a little different. Spotify has a well-published strategy of owning all things audio. That's what they want to do. They've literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying up what they think are the most important pieces. It'll be a great use case for business school down the line. It's not possible what they want to do. You cannot capture and own a decentralized open protocol. You can't. They thought they could buy the pieces of the platform with the hosting companies, but that's not how it works. I mean, I can still put a MP3 file in an Umbrel at home and it'll work. It'll be work on any real podcast app. What is happening with companies like Spotify, and not Apple, but Spotify and Google, is they're whores, and they think, oh, free content, we'll suck that shit up and we'll monetize it and people will love it. And it's not true. If you we explicitly said no, you cannot have our podcast on Spotify because we read your terms and conditions, and you can own it for whatever you want to do. No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in you putting ads in my podcast just for the privilege of being listed on your system. So no. And we've had to go at them a couple of times because pirated feeds would show up, and they're crazy. They're crazy to think they can maintain the legal aspects of a decentralized system of everybody's stuff just kind of flowing in. I mean, there's all kinds of copyright violations, all kinds of things going on. They never should have done that. But here they are, and they're just going to spend more and more buying up infrastructure. And what I've learned throughout the years, and there were many great examples, but I think the best one was America Online. I loved all these services, and I don't know if you ever had an AOL account, you probably know. So AOL truly was, God damn it, I feel old. AOL truly was, it came on floppy disks, and it was America Online. It's where you got online, and it was like a bulletin board system with screens. You could go into like discussion groups, you could get news, and of course mail. You've got mail. It was really the big one. And of course, as the internet was growing outside America Online, people were saying, we really want to try the internet. We want to try the internet. Can you make a web browser? So that, we heard about this web browser thing. And for a year or so, AOL was like, no, we don't want people. This is safe. It's secure. You're good here in AOL. This is a safe environment. And so finally they relented, and it was hilarious. They really marketed the internet like no one else could. So in order to get to the web browser, and that was, back in the day, it was pretty crude, brother. I tell you. It was like we could do blink tags, and that was our version of JavaScript coolness. And you'd say, okay, I want to access you have to click on all these screens. Are you really sure? It could be scary. You could see things that could freak you out. Your information could get stolen. They could take your firstborn. Are you really sure? You're really sure? Yes. Okay. Finally, you got a browser. And people loved it. That's where the cool, scary shit was. Yeah. People don't want homogenized shit. This is the proof is over and over and over again. And people will beg, kids especially will beg, borrow, steal to get that thing that they really desire, or that crazy ass thing that people are talking about. And so it's a mistake to think that you can make a safe, brand safe, because Spotify has to have everything brand safe in order to sell ads across it, because advertisers are still going to have a problem with being related to some content that is controversial. But all the cool stuff is with these other apps, and the hosts, no one's saying, oh my God, please just use Spotify because, man, it makes me so much money. No, man, it is really a great way to feed back to me. No, it has great features. No, it doesn't have great features. And the development group that is Podcasting 2.0, we have now 15 features we've rolled out in a year. And these are good features and people like them. Now, this is a slow burn. It's a grinder. Podcasting is always 15, 20% a year of growth, no matter what you're doing in it. But it's happening, more. And so now we've had enormous support from some of the bigger hosting companies. Now they're building these publication features that we've added right into their system. So now you can do chapters on Buzzsprout. You can do transcripts. And once people have that capability, they tell their audiences, get a modern podcast app, newpodcastapps.com. You can take advantage of it. And that's going to take several years, but eventually, these legacy apps, they either implement the features that everyone wants or they go away.
So how do you see this playing out? Do you think Spotify and Apple eventually enable lightning payments,
Fuck
enable
no.
value for value?
No, no, no.
So you
They
think they
will
go
give
away?
up on it before then. No, they're not going to do that. It would be a real last ditch effort. They also have way too many corporate issues with that liability and I mean, this is Wild West shit that we're doing here. We don't even know what's legal. We don't. If I send you sats, is that a gift? Is that tax deductible? Do I have a limit? What do you do? Is it property? Do you pay income taxes? Do you pay income taxes and then capital gains taxes, or take a loss? I mean, we don't know. We don't know. But we are saving all of our data. We're saving all of our transactions. We know exactly what we have, so we can always go and do it properly when we're told. This is way too dangerous for companies like that. And in their whole look, every single big tech company wants to be a couple things. They desperately want to be your bank. All of them. Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify isn't quite there yet, but they want to be your bank. They also want to be your doctor. Yeah, they want to be all this stuff, and they really want to get rid of people doing all this stuff for you. So they want to automate everything and want to just own you in your entirety. So I think that I have very high regard for your generation. I'll just call you the somewhat older millennials, and I understand why you think the way you do, because you kind of the social contract was broken and you all got pretty fucked in the process. A lot of that's my generation's fault. We weren't paying attention to who was on the school board and what they were doing and who was running the Federal Reserve, and we didn't care. We were too busy doing other stuff, or maybe just not paying attention, not being aware. But there's enough people in the right age range to build these alternative systems. And I don't think we have time or the energy I don't think we can fix these broken systems. They have to kind of implode upon themselves, and this is happening right now. Just to give you an example, where what I've seen with this COVID-19 is a huge decentralization of healthcare. Doctors, nurses, they're all leaving. They're using off-the-shelf technology to do telemedicine if they want, but they're doing concierge health services. They don't want to be a part of big systems. There's a lot of what we would call not alternative medicine, but what's the word I'm looking for? Functional medicine is the term. People are looking at other solutions than oil-based pharmaceutical products. So you're seeing this take place in real time, and to such a degree that now that we're seeing all of the real results of a lot of vaccinations not living up to standard, extreme measures that really weren't necessary, the non-thinking even about what some of the other effects of lockdowns and children in school would be, just bucket slave, do what I tell you. And so now that's all going to be blamed on the CDC, and they're being now completely obliterated, and we never should have trusted them. You listen to it. These cocksuckers are out there right now. The same people who said, follow the science, trust the CDC, are now saying, oh, yeah, they suck. We never should have listened to them. So that's going to collapse. That's a very big organization. No, it's faceless and nameless. What they do it on purpose because no one will get in trouble. No one person. It's just, we just have to revamp that. And that'll be another multi-billion-dollar agency of dread. But in the meantime, we are figuring out our own stuff.
Talk to me about the downfall of some of these institutions. Like you mentioned the CDC, you mentioned the Federal Reserve, you mentioned Spotify. How do we get to a point where they do implode and they do kind of like fall apart and enable us to build new systems in different ways?
Well, this is just me, and this is just what I've deconstructed and deduced, and what I think is going on, and therefore I think we're doing the right thing. And part of it is the old Bitcoin fixes this. Now, Bitcoin definitely doesn't fix everything, and I am a Bitcoin maxi, but it can be used to fix many, many things. And the way I look at the situation the world is in right now, do not have a health problem. Yeah, we have health problems. We have a financial problem. And the financial problem is of such a magnitude that I truly believe whether the pandemic was used/abused or whether it was created specifically for, we may never know, but for sure it helped slow down a very big problem in the financial system, mainly with the lack of fixing the liquidity that had been put into the system in the 2008-2009 crisis. And this was I believe was about to create massive inflation. They saw it. There's at least one big bank that is in financial trouble. There's no real analysis of this, but there's all kinds of crap going on. The way scandalous trading along with foreknowledge of what exactly was going to be done with money creation, etc. The people at the Federal, including Powell himself, is scandal. These are corrupt. These are very corrupt people. And so looking at the reverse repo markets in 2019, there was something wrong. And that something wrong was a big number. And it's not just the big number, but the Federal Reserve is the lender of last resort. So they were having liquidity issues. The Federal Reserve was printing the money for them, lending it to them, and not just overnight, but for 2 weeks or 2 months. There's a problem there. And that's not, a lot of people get confused and say, well, they're basically printing dollars. It's not entirely true because there's a difference between reserve dollars and the ones that are out in the market. But for sure, that imbalance has to be fixed. And it can't be fixed by raising interest rates too much. And I can't even explain why, but I believe that to be true. We just created more and more reserves in the past legislative 2 years. And now that we're kind of reopening, you're seeing 7.5% inflation, according to CPI jacked up bull crap formula numbers that have changed so dramatically. I mean, you can't compare it to 1972 or 84 or 87 or whatever, because they changed how the numbers put together. It's just like earthquakes. Those numbers changed too. We went from one scale to the other. No one really mentioned it, so there's a lot of shenanigans going on. Mm-hmm. So I believe the financial system is at collapse. And I did this great reset. I mean, John and I have looked at Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Group and all of these Bilderberg Group, the drinking clubs. Yeah, okay, the elites get together, circle jerk, whatever. But this World Economic Forum, that's the real deal. That's where the money people are. It's the economic forum. It's money people. It's bankers. It's the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada is an board advisor to the World Economic Forum. Justin Trudeau himself was a young global leader, as was Tulsi Gabbard. All kinds of Dan Crenshaw, all kinds of they seem to be captured. And the Great Reset. I mean, you can't reset something unless you reboot it, right? So have we had the reboot? No, I don't think so. I think they still need to go a little bit further, because the only way out of this at this point, without, I think, creating hyperinflation, is going to a central bank digital coin model where you can deal with inflation by really controlling the money supply. And you control the money supply with an ESG, environmental, social, governance-based social score that determines what you can spend your money on, or how much you can spend on certain types of polluting products like gasoline. That's great. Politicians love that, because once you're in, it's like show business for ugly people. You're in politics, and it's very hard not to get swept up in it. I can't generalize, or it can generalize, but it's not everybody. But power becomes a real thing. And can we just get these stupid people to do what we tell them to, because we know what's best for them? And I got to humanize them, but that's also just as value for value giving is something that turns out people really like doing. Believe it, when people get power, they are often corrupted severely, and they don't even know they're being horrible people. They don't even know it. This is just human nature.
Was your first introduction to Bitcoin through the lens of like the Federal Reserve and central banking and monetary policy, or was it through Lightning and streaming payments and being able to make smaller payments or larger ones on the internet?
My introduction came just around the birth of Bitcoin. And because I was doing the podcast, people kept saying, "Hey, this is a cool thing. You should look into it, Bitcoin." And I was in a different headspace. Couldn't really, like, I don't know. But people gave me, I had a wallet, like a Bitcoin Core running on an old Mac. I had 65 Bitcoin in there. And I just had that laying around at one point. I don't know. And one point, in addition to the podcast, I was day trading on NASDAQ. I'm like, oh, I'm going to fund this with that Bitcoin. It's like 900. It's like $1,000 now. I'm just going to sell all that shit. So I sold 65 Bitcoin for $1,000. Feel very bad about that. But I didn't understand it. And in fact, we would say on the show, well, you can't pay us in Bitcoin because I can't pay my rent in Bitcoin. I really had not. I'd never looked at the white paper, nothing. So I didn't do the investigative work. When Bitcoin went to 10,000, it got my attention because I sold 65 Bitcoin at 1,000. I'm like, well, I fucked up. What did I do wrong? I won't let that happen again. And I didn't. I learned, I paid attention. I really watched what was going on. And then during the pandemic, when Bitcoin went sub $4,000, my wife and I said, let's not make this mistake. And we went in and we stepped in sizably, and we've done dollar cost averaging ever since. And along with that came that from that moment, I was already seeing the Lightning Network, which, was just kind of its infancy. And so I bought a Raspberry Pi. I put together a Raspberry Blitz full node. And that's really when the joy started. I'm like, oh, because I wanted to have a wallet, something at home, and I wanted to have, I want it to be a home node. And it came with Lightning. And so I started learning about Lightning, and then I saw, oh, you can program this money. Holy fuck! What the things I can do. I found LN bits. I'm like, holy, look at this shit! Look at the shit you can do with this LN bits. Like, this is incredible. This is real, and this is for, like, I'm not a software developer. I can write some little bits. I can certainly understand and parse most of what's happening. It goes back to my wires in the projects board. I can always visualize how the thing operates, and that just blew me away. And that it all came at the same time, And then I called Dave. And I said, "Dude, we're gonna put this shit in to our index," because we had been just building the index. We didn't even have the API ready for months. It took a while to get all the feeds and get everything started, and it was just like, and we both looked at this like, this is unbelievable. This is so cool. And that was it. So the introduction was very early on. I had a harsh lesson, a good lesson for me. And now I'm also, because of my education, my Bitcoin background, I'm able to concentrate more on really the psychological effects. So with the boostograms, this is something that goes along with that. Oh crap! Yeah, people do want to support value for value. People say things like, "This is the most fun I've had parting with my money." In fact, I'm going to do a T-shirt. I monetize trolls because I get troll boostograms too. Like, hey, you suck, man. All right. Hey, thanks for the 1,000 sats. That's good for me, bitch. Boost me more. So, and this is psychologically mind-boggling. I know that there's psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'm sure that there's names and terms for this type of vibe, but it's a version, I think, of the dopamine hit that the social networks bombard you with to take advantage of you and to mess with your brain. But it's kind of like I can only have horrible examples, and I would hate for me to be quoted like this. But basically, it's difference between crack cocaine and really pure Colombian snow. It's like, this feels so good. I love doing this. I'm spraying sats everywhere, and you get the sats in, and it doesn't matter if it's 30 sats or 30,000 sats. It's like, how cool is it? and you just see, I don't know if in Fountain, but on the helipad now, every time there's even a streaming payment, it flashes green as the number goes up and a little confetti spews down. So you're just looking at your node like, oh, there's some more. Another one came in. Yeah. And it's like 50 sats, 60 sats. It tells me someone's valuing what I did at this very moment. This very moment, someone's listening to what I created and they value it so much, they're sending me little pieces of value back.
Why do you think that
That's
is so
phenomenal.
exciting? Because I have that exact same feeling when I
I
get
know.
sats, and it could be 10 sats. It doesn't matter. But I
Yeah.
see it and I'm like, I'm amazed. And then when I go tell a friend who's not into Bitcoin or not into Lightning, doesn't know about podcasting 2.0, and they go like, "What? Well, what's 10 sats?" And I'm like, "Well, it's like less than a penny, but like that's not the point." And they don't get it. Like, why do you think it's so exciting to us? And is this
But when
something you
they
think?
do it, when people do it, they get it pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Once they've done it, they're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And you have to have that loop, right? So you've got to read some of these boostergrams on the show. I
Yeah.
mean, this is part of the value for value, and you know, and people like, you know, this is why crowdfunding works. Crowdfunding, it's the comments. People go into crowdfunding sites for the comments. You're paying to support something and to comment.
Mm.
This is a big part of it. So you're commenting, and you know, there are some podcasts who are now putting their boostergrams on their website, so you can actually just watch what people are saying in real time as they're boostergramming, so everybody can see it. I mean, there's all kinds of cool experimentation being done, and I don't know why it is, but it's the same when we do a donation segment for value for value. We tell, so this person gave us $1,000, and here's the note that they had to go with it, and it's used, and we just turn that into content.
Mhm.
We just that become with, and you know, we try to please keep the notes short because you're driving me crazy. We, you know, we have to do a much longer show. If the donation segment's long, then the whole show is going to be much longer. Um, and it's a human thing. I don't understand how the brain works, but there's people out there who do. There's something about it that once you've done it and you've kind of gotten into the loop, you kind of love it. And so people say, I don't get it. I don't get it. They're giving you free. That's why Oscar is working real hard. We're all working hard, but Oscar is going to be the first test case with Fountain. We're working with Swan Bitcoin to be able to, well, first of all, if you sign up, you will get like 10,000 sats. Even if it's 1,000, who gives a shit? Just to try it out. And then this light KYC, which is basically name and email address, and you know, and then you can refill your wallet. I mean, so we have this double step that is a huge barrier to entry, which is first Bitcoin, then you got to get it on the Lightning Network, then you got it into a podcast wallet. It's
Yeah.
almost like if you presented this as a business plan, people are like, no, we're not funding that. You're crazy. That you'll never get to do that. And of
Yeah.
course, now you see everyone jumps in and everyone's working together, and that'll be a big one when someone can just grab an app and for the first time there'll be 1,000 sats or 10,000, and you know, and you will start to learn very quickly how enjoyable that is. I think that these types of things are going to bootstrap it really hard.
Hmm. I 100% agree with that. There's like the traditional way, or the way that like I got into Lightning was first learn about Bitcoin, then buy some, then hold it, then figure out like how do I move it to Lightning, then figure out how to spend it. And I'm spending it after I've been taught this is something I should hold on to and I should never
Right.
spend.
Well, but this is a part of it
Hmm.
because, you know, for guys like you and me, you know, we're starting to use Bitcoin for little things to buy stuff, right? And I think I have, you know, I use Breeze really for my, and I mix it up, but I like Breeze a lot just for walking around. I got a couple $100 in Sats on there, and you know, and whenever I can pay with Satoshis, I do it that way. But because I'm a hodler by nature, I really think like I'm going to pay for this with Sats right now. That could be worth a lot more in 5 years from now. Do I really want to do it? Is it really worth it for me? I'm applying the value for value rules in my head, and it makes me purchase less
Hmm.
and purchase consciously. And it makes me feel good about my purchase. I never regret it once I've decided, like, you know, like we pay voltage for one of our nodes and we pay in Bitcoin. And it's like, it's like $1,800 a year or something. And we could pay in dollars. We'd be okay. But I'm like, yeah, I kind of like it. We'll pay annually and we'll pay in Bitcoin. We're all in this together, and the sats have to flow.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling, by the way, I have a similar feeling about with value for value payments as I do with mining. I got an Antminer S9. Just plugged it in, got it on Slush Pool, and I just look at this every week or 2 weeks. It's like there's some freshly minted Bitcoin that I just knew and I got Bitcoin in, and you look at your Slush Pool, you look at the miner itself, you see the hash rate, you see the global hash rate, you see that it's churning, you see the rewards, what's being confirmed, and it's a great way to stack sats. Do it with a podcast. It's so exciting. My wife's like, how's John Henry? We call it John Henry, our miner. How's John Henry doing? Henry's doing pretty good. He did about 6,000 sats today.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes this entity that becomes part of your life. I mean, I wouldn't gush typically this much, except this is the Lightning podcast. So I kind of have to gush a little bit about how cool it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it changes the game when you can earn Bitcoin, because it cuts out that
Yes.
entire process, right? You don't have to learn about what it is. You don't have to move it to Lightning. You don't have to worry about the capital gains or any of that. Like when you're spending it, if you're earning it, it's just like it cuts through all of that process. And so it's a really quick way to get onboarded. And I kind of think that that's going to happen with a lot of different apps. There's gaming apps that are, starting to allow people to earn Bitcoin. There's going to be all sorts of use cases. There's Stacker News is like a Reddit style place on Lightning. You can earn for posting. I just had a friend who's producing this show now. I just set him up on Stacker News yesterday, and I just sent him an article. I said, try that on Stacker News. Earns his first few sats, and it's just like instant. Nothing.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do any
I just set
onboarding,
up
KYC, nothing.
Yeah. I just got my Bitcoin machine, the Umbrel in the bitcoinmachines.com casing. Because I love this idea. I love the home server. I just the whole thing. But I have one already. But I wanted an orange one. This is a museum piece that I'll have running in my server closet that everyone can take a look at through the smoky glass. But I got it specifically for LN bits with a public IP address, which you need kind of. And so today I finally went through the process of learning how to do Let's Encrypt. I hate the whole necessity for it, but okay. In this case, it's very valid to have SSL, and I cannot wait to set up. Probably I'll have a little faucet for some people. I want to test some pay links. I want to test some some of the. They've so many cool different extensions. And I just want to, kind of mess around and put a couple 100,000 sats on this node just to get people into it. Say, hey, grab this wallet. Watch how this works. Watch how the pay thing works. And that I think that's a fun way to kind of get people into it. And I can even, if I wanted to, I could host a wallet for someone. They can have a Zap or a Blue wallet connect to it if they just want to learn a little bit. This is part of the fun of Bitcoin, right? Is you get to experiment and break shit. And what's the worst that can happen? You can lose all your funds, you idiot. Oh, it's your own fault.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree.
Channel backups are important. There's no 24 words for your channels. That's you'll be very sad if you lose your channels.
When you think about Lightning podcasting and kind of this next era of podcasting 2.0, what do you think are the constraints holding back adoption today? Is it just the pain of getting sats into people's hands and getting them to start using it? Is it something else? Is it applications? Is it like Spotify and Apple kind of like holding people in and making it difficult for anyone to leave? In your mind, what's the biggest constraint right now?
It's all of it. It's all a huge constraint, but there's one simple fix. It's the easiest thing in the world. Everybody who does a podcast, if you're value for value, tell people to get a modern podcast app. That's the way. And everything falls into place from that. Even if you're not value for value, try a modern podcast app. There's features. Mm-hmm. if you go to newpodcastapps.com, you can see all the apps, what features they've implemented, but also the hosting companies. There's tons of other services now coming online. So we're bootstrapping it. And there's just no other, the only way this works with podcasting is podcasters have to tell their audiences, their listeners, their tribes, whatever you want to call it, to get a new podcast app. That's it. Or if you're currently using a podcast app that you like that may not have any of those features, email the developer. Most apps have a way to contact the developer. And, you know, it's fun because I help people as much as I can. Like, you know, well, I'm using Podcast Addict and it doesn't do this. And I said, well, here's an idea. Unlike Apple or Spotify, there's a little link here. You can contact the developer and approach them like a human being or her and say, hi, I love the app, whatever. Have you considered this? Because that's how developers work. When they get requests for features, then they'll say, hey, you know what? That's kind of cool. Yeah, I'll look at putting that in. Learn how GitHub works. You know, learn how to comment on a project. You can get a lot accomplished that way. What doesn't work is, oh, I hate this fucking app. It doesn't do the things I want. It's not ready for prime time. Hey, we're all in this together. If the audiences and listeners, if they don't cobble along, we did it the first time. I mean, there was no subscribe button back in the day. You had to tell people, all right, once you subscribe to this podcast, go to my website, look for the little orange XML RSS icon. Now you got to right click on that. Then you can do copy link. Now you're going to send that to yourself in the email. You get that out on your phone. Now you copy that link. You open up the app. You do add podcast. You paste it in there, and then you're done. Mm-hmm. And people did it, brother. People did it. People did it. So, yeah, we're in very much a centralized, hey, just fucking work type world. But people are getting hip to it. Like, okay, I have to do one little extra thing, and then it's really cool. I do have to make one extra step, or I've got to try something new that's not from Silicon Valley. There's no help desk. You know, there may be a guy you can talk to, but that's up to us. So everything's a bottleneck, but nothing is if all podcasters start telling people to try newpodcastapps.com.
Right. Now, you talked about a few different features that you're working on through the podcast index earlier in the show. Can you talk to me about how those features get adopted by modern podcasting apps? Does everyone have to use the same set of features, or can there be different features?
No. In fact, we have a really nice matrix at newpodcastapps.com where you can sort by features. And this is what's great about apps. You know, it's very personal. Developers usually develop an app because there's something they wanted their app to do that the app they were using didn't. So and it's always going to be personal. Some will focus heavily on audio. Some will focus on organization. Some will have it all. Some will be the Swiss Army knife. Some will be very sparse. It's all little different nuances. Like Fountain, you know, they have a transcript service built in for any podcast, not just if the podcaster publishes the transcript. So these are all features that, you know, that are personal to the app developer. There's no right or wrong way to do it. We have crazy ass implementations of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, you know, anybody can do what they want to do. What most of the developers are interested in is getting the value for value piece in a way that works for them. Again, everybody has their own scenario. Some don't want to run servers. Some, you know, everyone has a different way of working. And they want to do that because it's the bonding mechanism. You know, when you've got that in there and then people are using your app, then you're getting paid.
Right.
And believe me, for a developer, we just had Stephen B. He said, and he does a web-based app, CurioCaster. He also does sovereignfeeds.com if you want to create a full-on podcasting 2.0 feed of your existing feed. Very cool. He just made his 1 millionth Satoshi. Versus a guy that's never made any money from his software.
Yeah.
Giving it away for free.
You guys are then building, at the Podcast Index, you're building like an open set of standards and features that can be used by other podcasting apps if they choose to.
Correct.
Now, are there any in particular, maybe on the roadmap, that you are excited about? I know you teased a few of them earlier in the show. But is there anything that you're like, it changes fundamentally the way people interact in podcasts?
Yeah, two. Outside of value for value is the cross-app comments, which we touched on. This is very hard to do. And we have such a beautiful group of developers who just all came with their own ideas, and everyone is open and their biases are out, and and we do it on a Mastodon server, not a traditional way to do an open project, but that's been very helpful because the flame wars die down real quick. There's no algo to fuck it up and bring it back. so that's really good. But there's a lot of passion, and it's all been very manageable. And so this is a really important thing. And it's not the technological implementation. It's who owns what, who owns the root post, who can moderate, who can edit, who can delete, should they be able to, who owns a comment. All these things have been thought about, and we already have now implementations where I can post a comment in Podfriend on an episode and it shows up in Podverse and on CurioCaster. This is, we got a little bit more work here, and it's going to take a little more time because it does involve some more code. Specifically, we have one of our developers created a mini activity pub called Mini Pub, and it's like an SDK or something you can put into your code, and so that'll give that capability of the cross comment posting. So there's some work to be done there, and everyone has their own timeline. We got one guy, Franco, who does Cast-O-Matic. He's a doctor 4 days a week, and on the fifth day of the week he's a software developer. So we got people doing with all kinds of different timelines and schedules and priorities. The other one is live. This is a big one because this is where we start to cross over between what a lot of podcasters do is they go live on YouTube and then Rumble and BitChute and wherever else they can stream to. And they love the interaction of the live comments, which I would call a troll room, but let's just call it a chat box, super chats, all these types of things. And then that becomes your podcast. And so we just had a very successful test this past Sunday. We have a notification system called PodPing, where this is how it'll work. Your podcast app will literally send you a notification and will say, Lightning Podcast is live. It'll be live at 7:00, and then so you'll be alerted that it's going to start then. And then when it actually starts, you can set it up however you want, but this is the flow. You'll get an alert. You open your same podcast app you listen to the podcast in. You tap it. It starts playing the live audio or video, which will be through PeerTube, which means it's also distributed bandwidth. You have a chat room. Your boostograms show up in the chat room, so everyone can read along with the boostograms. Fucking mind blowing. And this was so cool to see this. Sir Spencer and Dame DeLorean, they did this on Sunday, and it was just so exciting to have the stream going, and then to have the boostograms coming through in the chat in the app. And then once they were done with the live stream, maybe 20 minutes later, there was the podcast version of it that popped up in the same app. This is big because we think that this is a great way to start to pull people away from these senseless platforms where you're more occupied with how do I not get my episode taken down for something that I said than actually focusing on what you want to say. It has all the benefits. The super chat is basically what then boostograms become in the live setting. So these are two features I think will be very, very exciting. And there's a lot of podcasters or YouTubers or content creators who are looking forward to this, especially because video. So we had to do a couple things. We had to make video work again in podcasting. It kind of went away because of the constraints of storage and bandwidth, and that's been solved to a degree. So, if you're going to stream in podcasting 2.0, you'll either use ODB, or you'll use StreamYard or something. You'll send an RTP stream to the PeerTube, which will be free for you to use, except in this case, that PeerTube operator might say, I'm going to take 10% of your stream while you're streaming so that I can pay for my infrastructure. And you're off to the races, and it'll work.
And
it's working.
aligned, incentives are aligned, right?
That's it. That's it.
Interesting. Do you think that?
Even though this is not going to pay anybody's lunch, not
Hmm,
yet. So, but it's not, again, as we determined, it's not about the amount. It's about the fact that, like, okay, it's 10 satoshis a minute right now.
yeah.
Okay, but that's not the point. I mean, the 10 satoshis could be worth a lot more in 5 years from now. B, it's not the point.
Mhm.
It's just the point is someone cared about what I did enough to send me something of monetary value in the chain because I participated in it.
So do you think YouTube is also in that bucket of like legacy tech where it is at risk of being disrupted by podcasting 2.0?
Disrupted. I don't know. I mean, the YouTube really makes their money on cat and baby videos. I mean, yeah, they got some big shows, but don't be confused about where their money comes from. It's a very, in fact, so much money is for children's advertising. It's disgusting.
Mhm.
So their model is wrong. I mean, look, I had the first Amazon Echo, now Alexa. Um, my God, 9 years ago. It was right, and no one was ever. It was launched with no, like, logo on it. People would lose their crap over this, and until I realized really how it worked and what was going on, I'm like, I don't want this in my house. I don't want this listening device in my house. I don't want my voice print stored somewhere. I love all the tech. I love the iPhone. I love all of this stuff. I love the cool cameras and the drones and the robots and the home automation. But your model is to spy on me and to sell my information. Fuck no.
Mm. So
So
do you think?
that's the point where we have to get to. And when the social credit score comes in, when you can't use certain things because it's all tied in, you'll be wishing that you'll be looking at alternatives like Bitcoin.
Yeah. And so this approach to podcasting right now is like this, it's the self-sovereign approach, right? It's like you own your own money, you own your own data, you're sending it back and forth for value that you are giving out into the world. Do you think that is going to then apply to all sorts of industries? Do you buy into the idea that we become more self-sovereign as a nation, as a world over time, as these apps continue to kind of like exert influence on what we see and what we think and what and change the way we interact with them to fit their business models.
Well, we're going to be in this situation until something changes, and these are very well-known situations. What do people in Africa do when their money is hyperinflated? They look for alternatives. What's the alternative? Typically, the U.S. dollar. So when the U.S. dollar is in the same situation, what are we going to turn to? Well, is it going to be SDR? Is it going to be the IMF money? What is it going to be? And it won't just be because of hyperinflation. It'll be because of restrictions. It'll be like, no, you can't buy more than 10 gallons of gas. So I'm going to have to go look for some other person to buy it from. And now that the money has literally been censored before our very eyes with our brothers and sisters in Canada. And I don't care what you're doing. They literally have stopped the ability for money to flow based upon, whatever they just made up. Hello. And that's these are American companies that now cannot send money, and people are being investigated for using that system. Well, you don't have to be a genius to know that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, no, I'm going to, and it's just a lot of people are going to walk away from that. Say, no, I don't want to do that. So when I'm buying beef now, I like the idea that we're doing that out. No one can stop the beef from me from picking it up, and no one can stop me from paying for it. I mean, these are the fundamental things. So there's always, like, I remember when I was in Russia in 1989, the Moscow Music Peace Festival. This is before the wall came down, before David Hasselhoff freed Eastern Europe, because it was the Hoff who did it. Yeah, do you even know David Hasselhoff?
Not as well as you do.
No. Okay. Fuck. All right. The currency at the time, of course, was the ruble, and you could use dollars, but really, toilet paper rolls and tuna fish. That's how I got shit done in the hotel. The ladies didn't even want my dollar. No. You got some tuna fish? You got some? Do you have some Matchbox cars? Because I knew that I was told this is all the stuff you want to bring. So there's always going to be this economy so that people can live with some comfort. Now, that is all very complicated as a barter instrument. Carrying around, 10 rolls of toilet paper and 20 cans of tuna fish and Matchbox cars in your coat pocket is just not easy to use. So obviously the technologies the protocol that we have makes that, possible in every single way. So we're going to have to learn to combine the online network with the offline network. And I'll give you an example. I love that the Bitcoiners came out for the truckers in Canada, and we crowdfunded it, and it was cool and it worked great. But there's one extra step we need to do. And, so now it'll be hard for you to turn your Bitcoin into fiat fund coupons. They're going to restrict that. So distributed exchanges, they really work, where you are peer-to-peer exchange. But also, I mean, in a case like this, what would have to happen is someone who has Bitcoin on the ground who wants Bitcoin will go and buy the diesel, bring the trucker the diesel, and keep the Bitcoin. So that's a peer-to-peer type exchange. We're going to have to do these types of things, but you can actually quite successfully one of these peer-to-peer distributed exchanges or decentralized exchanges, and it works. There's a dispute process, and I'm sure there's a small percentage that fucks up, but in general, you can buy and sell Bitcoin, almost any currency you want, with one other individual, and it works fairly well. With you have to stake some funds to lock it up, and then it's just sent through Zelle or or through SEPA in Europe, the European banking network. You receive your funds, or you can send them that way. So that's what it'll have to be, and then simultaneously we have to pay attention and vote, and let's vote some of these reptiles out, and let's vote some new people in. We can't go wrong by changing the losing team. It's not like this team that we see everywhere is winning, and goes for your local school board, goes for the board of your hospital, goes for the board, everything for your local city council. Oh man, my generation did not pay attention to city councils. We still are not good at it. And then your politicians and your president and all this stuff, and know that we have the same power we have over getting the products we want, getting the Bitcoin we want. We absolutely have the power to elect the people we want and make them do what we want them to do. But they've got to start imploding. That has to go down while we kind of figure it out, our own networks over here. And then we'll see. I don't think I'll be around for the resurrection of the real great reset. It's going to take a long time. But man, we can have some fucking fun doing it.
Yeah. Do you think we're at escape velocity now in the Bitcoin community, where if tomorrow America or Canada or some other country said, listen, no more Bitcoin, we're shutting it off, do you think that we have the critical mass today to sustain an economy and to kind of like get around that? Because as you said, there's like on-ramps and off-ramps being built all over the place. There's new ways to earn Bitcoin now. There's new ways to pay it. You can do it peer-to-peer. But we did see, when Canada came out and said, look, we're going after people who are donating, and we're going after Bitcoin addresses too. It's kind of sent a chill through the community, at least from my perspective on Twitter. What's your interpretation of like how close we are to getting to the point where no matter what a government says, you almost can't stop it? Do you think we're there yet?
Well, you can't stop it. You can't stop Bitcoin. You can't stop the transaction. That would be like saying we're stopping email. Okay, if you're going to stop email, then you can stop Bitcoin. So you literally cannot stop Bitcoin. It's my belief that we are at that, I think you said escape velocity. I kind of like that term. I like that because, I think we're at escape velocity because too many established organizations are in it. The banks are in it. The hedge funds are in it. They're all in it. Soros is in it. Berkshire Hathaway is in it. Goldman Sachs is in it. Big companies have it in their treasuries. It's too deeply integrated. I think that we're at escape velocity because the elites know it's an escape hatch. I think they're hedging and they will keep that shit open. They may crush everything else. I think stable coins are a real problem, and that is the real focus of I think of a lot of this legislation, because stable coins are by definition inflationary. They inflate the money supply in of the dollar, so it's there's a problem there, a real one. It's crazy how that kind of came together. And there's a lot of smart people have been doing it, but I think that's where the focus will be.
There's a lot of people actually working on bringing stablecoins to Lightning now. Like there's a few
I
initiatives
was
that are
reading
underway.
about that. It was a very, and of course I have mixed thoughts about that. But when you take away the metaphor of a wallet and coins dropping in and all this, in essence, a Lightning channel between two entities is just a multi-sig wallet on chain that says we're going to settle this at some point in the future, and how we settle it and who gets what portion, we're going to let you know when we close out this transaction with our two signatures. So what we're then doing privately on whatever channel, we could be trading chicken breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just an agreement. I mean, it's in that regard, in a way, in an odd way. Well, I don't know enough about the technical underpinnings, but in theory, I understand how you can use. And I saw the article that shows, how you would do it or how you can do it today. Basically, shorting your own shit. It's like it's a hedge mechanism, which I think is beautiful. And I personally don't really mind. I don't want it, but I don't mind that it's possible. It doesn't seem like it's a real big issue. I mean, as long as I can route my sats through the network, I don't know. I mean, there's no requirement for what kind of hardware it has to run on. So channels are, those are kind of closed off things.
Mm-hmm.
And, the security of what happens in the channel is the multi-sig wallet that hangs underneath, and that's on chain. So that's not a stable coin thing. I don't understand all of how this works, but I think philosophically I get it. I'm not interested in even looking at it. I don't give a shit. I got 3 nodes I'm running. I love my Bitcoin. I love setting up channels. I love figuring out what works best with fees and how I help people but don't get killed on liquidity. There's lots of things that are beautiful by itself. I'm just not really interested in what people are doing with it. But I do feel that there seems to be a little bit of concern out in the space about this happening.
Yeah, well, I guess the two different sides I see. One is we don't want anything else. We just want Bitcoin, and like everything else is a shitcoin. And then the other side is, well, people don't want to hold Bitcoin all the time, or it limits merchant adoption maybe, or it limits like the things you can do if you have to incur a capital gain when you buy or sell, when you send Bitcoin. So I see the two sides of the argument. I guess my question to you would be, do you think that would contribute to increasing adoption of podcasting 2.0? If I could, if you could go to a podcaster and say like, listen, turn on value for value, start accepting funds. If you don't want Bitcoin, fine, you don't have to take it. You can get dollars. You can get Bitcoin too, but if you don't want it, dollars are there for you. If you don't want that kind of like mental challenge of going through the hoops and,
Yeah, I'm not interested in that either. I don't understand. We're either onboarding people or we're not onboarding people. That is like either you take the time to use your brain for 3 fucking minutes and say, okay, this is a system. It's like any other currency. If I want to get it into something else, I got to go through some hoops and do something. I don't think it's necessary. I think the more inherent problem is getting from Bitcoin to Lightning. I mean, I would love to introduce people to Bitcoin through Lightning. That seems to be a great on-ramp. Like, oh, this is fast. Oh, I get this. And I just say, Lightning, it's Venmo for Bitcoin. Oh, okay. Yeah. I get it.
Okay, so maybe to finish this off, talk to me about some of the interesting applications you're seeing on Lightning now outside of the podcasting 2.0 space.
Well, for me, it's all using the same technology. Music is next. So what I'm interested in is helping people distribute and, in this case, create experiences and monetization around media, because that's what podcasting is. So it's just as valid to use the same system for an audio book, even for a PDF. If we have a PDF player that can do page-by-page payments, and music is going to be a big one. We can use the same infrastructure. We just need different type of apps that present the information differently. So I will push that. I'll just continue to push that. I think the live aspect will be very interesting way for people to get some hands-on experience with Lightning. I'm thinking of like the Versus type thing where you can have people. And again, it's all established things, but it's we don't have to answer to anybody. If we want to have two hip hop artists competing against each other, and we're voting with our sats. And by the way, I want this in the club. I want to have two screens. Bop! I want to be able to flash a QR code. Goes to the DJ, goes to the bar staff. The splits thing is really what's cool. And even LM Bits has a multi-split payment option. So what we need to do is we need to get this in the hand of users. So podcasting is great because the technology and the developers and the users have to work together in order for success to happen. So in this case, I'm like the Uber user where I will put all this shit in my feed and I'll try everything, and I blow stuff up all the time, and people, and I break stuff, and I find because it's just, I'm a user, and so I use it, and it's like they were trying to troubleshoot this helipad, which is like reading the boostograms, and I have 40,000 entries in my database. So that was something that helped the debug process, because now you've got every single crazy shit that came through from every app where someone had one bracket wrong and it breaks everything. So that's what we need. It only becomes something exciting when the users are using it and put it in their hands. LM Bits is a great example. This gives people the tools to figure out how they want to use it. People can take money from me. I can pay money. They can tip me. I can split stuff. I can set up a DJ stream. I'm not sure if that one works really well. I calls for the kind of stuff. So LNURL is actually, I looked at that very long before I found KeySend, which became the solution for us, which will be, when Bolt 12 comes along, we'll have other ways, there's AMP payments, there's all this stuff. But LNURL, to me, was exciting because as a user, as a kid who can follow instructions and put a wire between two components on a board, I got it. I understand this. It took me a little while to get the Let's Encrypt shit working. Mm-hmm. That was my project this morning, actually. I've always failed at this. Doing it on a Raspberry Pi through your router at home, I've always failed. But we've made it easy with Tor. I mean, Tor is not appropriate for OpenLM Bits use, but with Tor you can have your Umbrel and you can set it up on an old laptop, and just need a terabyte USB drive, and oh my God, you can run your own mail server, and you can run Next Office, and you can run all kinds of little cool apps. And this is a whole category of home device, mm-hmm. and they are kicking ass. Umbrel, Start9, these are all great little boxes. And Tor, although slow and has its problems, it lets users very quickly spin something up, have it on their phone, walk outside, it's how far does my signal reach, be able to access their own stuff, and lo and behold, their own bank, their own money, and it's fun. It's fun to do. So this is what we need. I don't think it's this one particular thing. I mean, even like the events extension on LM Bits, you can sell tickets. You can sell tickets to, do a lemonade fundraiser, just something for the group. There's the point of sale is a big app, offer it to your customers. Like, hey, if you want, you can pay a Bitcoin and just type it in and scan it. Like the Breeze app has a really sophisticated, well done inventory management system for point of sale on the spot. Set it up. Anyone can do it. It works. So
you've got my head spinning with possibilities. It's just
LN Bits is the one
spinning.
that fucked with my head the most. I was like, I can do all this, and I probably, if I really wanted to change something in the code, I could, do enough Stack Exchange searches, and I could find sort of Reddit somewhere. Someone will have some idea. It's like just to change your node ID, so it's not just the number. I want it to have a name. You got to search around. You got to learn some stuff. But for me, here's the first. And you got kids?
No.
Would you like my 31-year-old daughter? I can give you as many kids as you want. To like get them off my payroll. If a recommendation is you got kids, don't give them a fucking iPad. Give them an old laptop and a Linux distro on a USB drive and say, do this, figure this shit out, set this up, make this thing work. That will be something that will take your kid through many, many years of adult life in happiness, because they will have learned that not everything has to come from the big tech man in the sky, and they can do it and they can make it look the way they want to. And encourage your kid to set up a Mastodon on the same laptop. Help the kid break some ports open or whatever it is. That's what we need to do. You cannot live in this. It's like when I was growing up, you had to know how to put the chain back on the bike. You had to know how to pump up a tire, change a flat. You had to know how to clean your spark plugs. You had to know all this stuff. Automobiles were toast in that regard. I mean, you can't fix anything yourself. But our computers and our technology, you can't do shit to your iPhone. But you can learn how to get an older device and put Graphene OS on it and use an open app store, and learn how to communicate with the people who make the software to make it work better the way you'd like it to work. Just because you can't code doesn't mean that you can't talk to someone and say, hey, man, here's a thought I had. I'm a user. I love your stuff. By the way, let me send you $5 in sats. Thanks. Mm-hmm. I do this all the time. Please, people, if you see someone asking for a coffee or a tip or value or whatever, do it. If you're using the piece of software, do it.
Love that advice. Great way to end off the episode.
Oh, yeah. Do it. It's just as creative as podcasting. It's writing. And you can code something in a million ways like you can write a novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people go to find out more about you and the Podcast Index?
Well, podcastindex.org is where you can find. I mean, it's a directory, but there's links there. You can find links to the apps. You can find links to all the podcasts that are value for value enable. If you're a developer, you can sign up there. You can even add your podcast if for some reason it's not in the database. How crazy! You can add it in there. You can sign up at the podcaster wallet. So literally, you search for your podcast. You click on the little lightning bolt and it takes you through the whole process. It'll even help you select a node so you can value for value enable your podcast right away. On Mastodon, I'm Adam at podcastindex.social. I'm also on Twitter, but I'd prefer that you reach out to me through the federated Mastodon. That's and if you don't know what that is, kids, get a Mastodon account. It's the future. It's the future.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for pushing forward this podcasting 2.0 space. I've learned a ton in the last few months just trying it out, and it's really empowering to see it working, and to see it happen in real time. So thank you for all you're doing with the Podcast Index as well.
It's entirely my pleasure, Kevin, and thank you because you're doing the actual work. I'm just here sitting in my studio coming up with shit, and then I try to help motivate people to build it and use it. And I also want to compliment you. You have a very nice demeanor when you're interviewing. I look at you and I keep saying, man, this guy is Tony Robbins' son. He's got something nice about him. So you have a very nice vibe, and it's nice. It's nice to listen to your show.
I appreciate the kind words. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. And thanks again.
Anytime you want, man. You just let me know.
Awesome. Talk soon. Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage. Voltage is the industry-leading provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. In fact, many of your favorite apps and services already use Voltage to scale their business quickly and easily without maintenance. Voltage also offers an inbound liquidity product called Flow, which helps you as a node operator get inbound liquidity easily. Overall, Voltage is creating the industry standard suite of non-custodial products, helping brands, engineers, and startups scale. To learn more about Voltage, visit voltage.cloud. Okay, let's get into it. We had 16 different supporters send in sats this week. I believe that's another record high. I've kind of lost track at this point. The numbers just keep growing and growing. Real quick, I'll run through the top 5. Mary Oscar sent in 3,769 sats. Y sent in 3,366. BitBoom sent in 1,386. Jeffrey sent in 1,188. And Rustin sent in 990 sats. That's what it takes to make the top 5 now. There were 12 different episodes that were supported this week. I've only done 22 episodes. That's more than half of all the episodes that I've ever done got sats this week, which is kind of cool. Also got a bunch of questions in. I'm going to read through them in order here of receipt because I can't order them by number of sats yet on Fountain, but that's a feature request if anyone from Fountain is listening. First up, we have Jacko who says, yo, on episode 19. Thanks for the comment and the sats, Jacko. We had BitBoom who says, damn, interesting show and super inspiring. And this is episode 22 with Elise Colleen. BitBoom says, I'd love a free month on Voltage. I'm trying to hook up a number of coffee shops in town to accept Lightning, and a Voltage BTC Pay server would be awesome to use as a test case. BitBoom also left their Twitter handle. BitBoom, I'm sending you a code for a free month on Voltage, and that's the last free month code that I have. We'll be doing more giveaways and contests in the future. Thank you for sending in the sats in the comment. Mary Oscar says hi. Thank you, Mary Oscar, for the comment and the sats. Y says, great episode, and this is episode 22 with Elise Colleen. Fascinating look at the novel world of Bitcoin VC. Y also sends in another message that says, how do various guests conceptualize the Bitcoin ethic? In this case, I'd love to hear Elise's experience with Bitcoiners' reactions to VC. They seem somewhat antithetical. Also, Kian Kusha cued me into the strong open source ethos around BTC as well. How do VCs feel about open source and sharing code, etc.? This is a great question. I'm going to send this one off to Elise because I think she'd have a better answer, and you specifically asked for her take, not mine. So I'll send this off to Elise, and when she responds, I'll let you know what she says on the next episode. Thank you for sending the question, though. Jeffrey says, another great show. Love the predictions. I would put a Voltage coupon to good use. Would give me an excuse to hack for a few weekends. Jeffrey also left their Twitter handle, but Jeffrey, your Twitter handle is not active right now. It looks like it's suspended, the one you sent me. So unfortunately, I can't reach out to you. But if you have another Twitter handle or email, let me know. Y says, great question in response to one of the questions I asked in episode 22, and also says, Pink Frog, that's the name of the company that Elise was talking about, a Bitcoin gaming company. If you want to check Pink Frog out, they are at pnkfrg.com. And that's all the questions we had this week. Thank you all for sending in comments, questions, sats. Can't wait to see what you bring in this week. I know there's a lot to go through in this episode. Adam dropped a ton of knowledge on podcasting 2.0, value for value. So if there's anything you guys want me to explain more or cover more, or if you have any questions for Adam that you'd like me to ask him, send in some sats, send in your comments and questions, and I will get to them this week. See you soon.